I'm Percy Jackson, son of Poseidon, god of the sea.
Did you like the Sea of Monsters movie? When you think about it, it's not a terrible movie. Not a great movie, but not terrible. But only if you look at it as a standalone film, one without any history or extended universe. But of course, then you have to remember that the Percy Jackson universe has its own rich world to draw on. One full of quirky goodness and nuance. That's what drew readers in the first place. The movie just lacked all of that. Just like the first one. Because apparently, they just haven't learned. Commercially, the films were a success, simply because they were a fun movie to take kids to. But they are universally reviled by fans of the books. And the creator himself. That's right, Uncle Rick hates the movies, and to this day, he still hasn't seen them. And I can't say that I blame him. As a writer and a creator myself, I really hate to see my work butchered in that way. Honestly, if my work was ever commercially successful, which I seriously doubt will ever happen, I don't think I could ever allow myself to option the rights to it, simply because what I create belongs to me and the fans. And I just don't want some corporation coming in and trying to squeeze every last drop of money they can out of it. Which is exactly what they did with the Percy Jackson movies. So let's take a look at what makes the Sea of Monsters so terrible. First off, it's completely unfaithful to the original source material, to an extent that it only bears a passing resemblance to the books. Sure, it's got the quest for the fleece in there, but there are so many pointless additions and subtractions. One of the biggest problems with this movie series has always been the age. In the first movie, he's 17 years old. So in the second film, Sea of Monsters, he's probably still 17 or nearly 18 years old, which allows for no progression of character whatsoever. In the first book, he starts off at 11, so he can evolve into this fierce, brave, intelligent hero. Then there's the fact that the personalities of the characters have changed so drastically. I mean, Percy isn't embarking on this quest out of the selfless need to protect and save the camp or his friends. It's all for his own personal glory, which changes his character motivation completely. Then we have Annabeth. She's just not the same feisty badass that we get in the books. The one who saves Percy's life so many times that you lose count. Like, from the Lastrygonian giant, or on Circe's island, or takes control after the boat explodes. Instead, she spends the entire movie complaining and whining. Actually, if you removed her from the film, there wouldn't be any change whatsoever. Grover is the super annoying comic relief character, and not in a good way. They have stripped him of everything that has made him a compelling and deep character. He wasn't a protector in the first film, only having earned it for the second, which means his entire personal quest to become a seeker and search for Pan has been thrown out. Which means he will never become a Lord of the Wild. He will never evolve into that leader who rallies the satyrs and the nature spirits. Clarice. Clarice is a terrifying and determined daughter of Ares. Then she sort of becomes a watered-down beauty queen version of herself. Not to mention that Tyson is made much more aesthetically pleasing, rather than deal with the concept of difference in the film. The first film failed to set up anything for the second film, which means that they had to rush the beginning of Sea of Monsters in order to set up a fully functioning film, which arguably they still failed at. And then they suddenly changed Annabeth's hair color in the second film. I mean, it was supposed to be blonde in the first place, but that seems like such a random thing to suddenly care about. Plus, they've only just established Thalia and her tree now. I mean, that was supposed to be set up in the first one as the protection for the entire camp. The mist was never explained or utilized in The Lightning Thief. So when it's introduced in Sea of Monsters, it comes out of absolutely nowhere. Plus, it makes so little sense. I mean, they only really used it to make Tyson prettier. But entire plot lines and characters were left out. Ones that needed to be established in order for future films to be made. Which we never got, though thank God for that. But imagine if we had gotten a Titan's Curse film and they had completely neglected the introduction of Nico. Mr. D wasn't in the first movie, but he's suddenly in the second. It's sort of a who the hell is he and why do we care moment. I mean, he didn't actually offer a lot to the film. Chiron wasn't even supposed to be at the camp. As a son of Kronos, they didn't trust that he hadn't poisoned Thalia's tree himself. Which is the reason that Tantalus was supposed to be running the camp, and he was the reason that Percy wasn't selected for the Fleece mission. Instead, that's why Clarice was sent. But it also completely excludes the Hermes plotline. He's the reason that Percy actually left camp to go on the quest. He even gave him supplies to do so. Because Hermes wanted to help his son. He wanted to help Luke. He wanted to see if there was anything left in him to save. So this weird, disinterested Hermes shouldn't have existed. I mean, as much as I love Nathan Fillion, it just didn't fit. I get cutting films down for time constraints. We've all seen what has happened when you try to push too much into a movie and then completely run wild. I'm looking at you, The Hobbit. But we've also seen what happens when it's done correctly. Nothing can ever be perfect, but Sea of Monsters, it lacks the epicness and monumental undertaking of the quest for the Fleece. Somehow it condenses this entire journey into a few lackluster battles, ones that actually take away the victories and triumphs of the characters who actually deserve them. And at the same time, it fails to establish characters' weaknesses, like the encounter with the sirens and learning about Annabeth's fatal flaw, her deadly pride. So what I don't understand is why ignore everything that the book gives you in order to establish characters and the future of the world. And instead you drop in this epic, overdramatic battle that defeats the main villain of the entire series in the second movie. Kronos is defeated by a few teenagers. He's defeated by a few teenagers when it should have taken several gods to even make a dent. But where are they supposed to go after that? The movie, it still ends on the book's cliffhanger of Thalia waking, but they've already defeated the main villain. The writing is bad. The dialogue is terrible and cheesy and cliche, and it lacks any subtlety whatsoever. Plus, the delivery is subpar. Percy just sounds incredibly bored. Not that the actors can be solely blamed for that, given what they were working with. I mean, the character development just isn't there. The movie lacked any real spirit, and was sort of limp in comparison to the beefiness of the books. Clearly, the studio was just trying to capitalize on the craze of YA at the time. So, yeah. Sea of Monsters, it kind of sucked.
What are you doing? Don't walk on my roof.